All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Alex. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself here in just a minute, but I work for a company called Aplos, and this is a webinar today that's going to be an accountant guide to managing nonprofit and church clients using our software, which again is called Aplos. And it is a 2-hour webinar, so saddle up, get comfy. I hope you have a full cup of coffee. I've got my cup of coffee here, as well as some water. I will also be taking some breaks for some polls, so if you need to skip out and go to the restroom or something, you can use that time to do that. But for the most part, for the next couple of hours, we're going to be just going through a number of things. But first, before we get started, I want to show you a little video here, of which I will bounce over to the website. And I'm going to play this. I don't know exactly how this is going to work. I think you should be able to hear it. But if not, then I will give you the link and we can do that a different way. But let's go ahead and give that a shot here.
Our firm was looking for some cloud options for our clients, and we looked around. We looked at QuickBooks, looked at Xero, but nothing was really focused on nonprofits. And so we wanted an option that spoke nonprofit accounting. That's something we really needed, and found Aplos, and here we are. Some of those other systems, there's workarounds and there's ways that you can do it in those systems, but it's just not as easy and it doesn't speak nonprofit the way that Aplos does. I love to see data, the way it works, the way it can answer questions, and for me to be able to use that skill as an accountant for nonprofits whose missions I love, whose programs I love, and to be able to offer that skill set and say, hey, here's what's going well, here's what you need to improve, here's what your books are telling you. Man, I love doing that. Those clients we serve, they're visionaries, they're entrepreneurs, they're creatives, and that's great. We love working with them. We love being the backside of their ministry. And Aplos does that as well. We get to work with a software system that understands that nonprofit is ministry and business. It's a very user-friendly system, so just giving that option to our clients so that they can see in real time as we've posted their numbers, they can log on and view for themselves to be able to access that data wherever I am. If I need to be on the road to meet with a client, I can access my books anywhere and do what needs to be done. Fund accounting is a must for most of our clients, and Aplos does that specifically for nonprofits better than anybody. Aplos understands that there's a difference between donor history and accounting. They're talking about the same dollars, but they're very different things. Aplos is managing your donors and your accounting in separate categories, and that's the way you want it. You want to be able to see your donors and their history in a separate light from your books, because that really is two different data sets. To do non-tax deductible gifts right in one system, that's not something that no other accounting software that I've seen is able to do. So to be able to do that seamlessly in one transaction is a big win for us. You can go with another system that's built for for-profits and you can make it work. Yes, you can do that. But if you want something that organically speaks nonprofit accounting, Aplos is the way to go.
All right, hopefully you guys could hear that. Again, I wasn't sure if that was just going to play normally or play through my audio, so hopefully that was audible. So let me just give you the link to that real quick too. So in our little chat, I'm going to throw the link there. So in case you wanted to go watch that separately, that's the link to that video. But what Drew was mainly talking about here is kind of a good kind of summary as to what we're going to be talking about here today. So we're going to go through a number of things, kind of chiefly being how Aplos handles certain things like fund accounting, what products and prices we offer to that demographic, a little bit of history of who we are and what we've come to do. And then we're also going to take a pretty detailed look at the fund accounting in Aplos and how to kind of categorically set that up. And then lastly, we'll take a look at some kind of tools that we have available for nonprofit accountants or oversight type users. So a couple of housekeeping things. I noticed some other people I've already asked this in the chat, but if you have questions, feel free to use that question field. That will be available throughout the webinar. So if you have anything, feel free to shoot some stuff in there. I will do my best to answer things as we go, but for the most part, there'll be some Q&A time at the end of our session today for me to go through any questions. Again, if I can't get to something, then we will follow with you afterwards. We'll also send you a copy of the presentation and a recording by email after the event. So this is being recorded. So once it's done, we'll polish it, put it on YouTube, send you the link, as well as a copy of the presentation if you'd like. And for the CPE portion of things, during our session today, it's a 2-hour session. Again, you have to answer at least 6 of the 8 polls during the webinar. I'm going to do these every 10 or 15 minutes or so. We'll launch another poll, so just be sure to participate with those. You also have to be present for at least 100 minutes of the presentation. So out of the 120, you need to be here for 100. You also need to complete the evaluation exit survey at the end of the webinar, which should trigger automatically. You don't need to go anywhere. It'll just ask you to do a survey. And then during the survey, at the end of it, you have to confirm the name that should appear on your CPE certificate during that exit survey. So once that's all completed, that will then kind of officialize the CPE process, and we'll get you your certificate for that. All right, so kind of an overview for today. So a specialized financial platform for nonprofits and churches can be a dynamic tool for your clients, especially with the assistance of a trusted accountant to advise them. So software and services and tools are very important, but is enhanced by having someone that kind of understands that as well as what it needs to accomplish as well. So this webinar is going to serve as an in-depth guide to how you can use Aplos to manage your clients, including setup, customized reporting, and client management options. The session is also ideal for professional accountants and bookkeepers who are considering managing clients in Aplos and have at least a basic understanding of fund accounting principles and bookkeeping tasks. So that's me. I'm Alex. I've been around Aplos for, I'm completing my 7th year here pretty soon. The company has been around for 9 technically, so I'm actually the first paid employee of the company. So I've been around for quite a while, seen a lot of different phases of our product and company. Currently, I am one of the heads of the customer success department of Aplos. So our role is to provide support and services and just anything really our customer base needs in order to help them handle their finances and donor management things. So our learning objectives for today. So we're going to go through first an overview of Aplos as a specialized solution for nonprofits and the management platform available for professional accountants and bookkeepers. We'll then take a look at, we'll review some common chart of account structures for nonprofits and churches, as well as admin options for streamlined chart of accounts setup and roll-up reporting. We'll then look to how we can implement tags, which is a feature that we have in Aplos to accomplish more complex reporting needs and to generate a Form 990 report. We'll then take a look at some common transaction activity, including transactional imports, journal entries, donation tracking, payroll imports, recurring transactions, fixed assets, and allocations. And then lastly, we'll look at how to understand on how to improve practice efficiency, including time tracking, task tracking, currency conversion, billing options, and how to onboard clients. So we're really going to cover kind of the gambit. We're going to take a look at the company, the products, the software itself, and then what are some advanced things that you guys can do as accountants. So real quick, let's do the first poll. All right, so here, poll number 1, it will just pop up on your screen here in just a second. Launch poll. Okay, so question here is, let's see, where did my poll go? Here we go. What accounting software do you typically recommend to your nonprofit or church clients? Answers are Aplos, QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Desktop, other fund accounting system, or other small business accounting system. I'm going to give that another about 7 seconds or so. All right. Great. So the question again was, what accounting software do you typically recommend to your church or nonprofit clients? 43% said Aplos, so that's great. 26% QBO, 22% QuickBooks Desktop, 0% other fund accounting system. It's interesting. 9% other small business accounting system. Awesome. Thank you for doing that poll. Okay. So that first learning objective here. So an overview of Aplos as a specialized solution for nonprofits and the management platform available for professional accountants and bookkeepers. So a couple things here. So Aplos focuses on providing web-based fund accounting solutions for nonprofits and churches. A little bit about us, just kind of as a company history. Our founder and CEO, Tim Getz, he's a CPA, was doing a lot of audit and CPA work for a long time, then kind of transitioned into an executive pastor role at a church here in Fresno, California, where we're located, or at least most of us are located. That church is a multi-site church, and also was very involved in kind of community outreach, so planting lots of nonprofits. And so Tim's kind of entrepreneurial spirit, plus the CPA experience, plus the church leadership, kind of created this like perfect combination of experience to say, I need to do fund accounting. I know that, but my options are pretty limited. And there's either really expensive solutions out there that look like they were designed in DOS, or there's QuickBooks or something like that is not a fund accounting solution. So I'm either faced with, antiquated technology and expensive things, or a non-fund accounting solution that we're going to have to work around. So he finally kind of did something about that, and here we are close to 10 years later. So we kind of primarily focus on the web-based fund accounting, but we also do have other products. The other software solutions that we have include e-filing for the Form 990 series, donor management, as well as member management. The kind of last product that we have here is called Aplos Oversight, and that's, again, what we'll kind of be taking a look at throughout our presentation today. What that does is it provides a unique function that allows users who have need of overseeing or managing multiple organizations to easily access the financial data, consolidate financial statements, track internal time and metrics, and share information with their clients. So it's kind of a bookkeeping, accountant, and even unrelated to even just providing a service for nonprofits, like some sort of district oversight, or some sort of like we have a lot of churches and organizations that need to have separate sets of books, but they want to run consolidated reports. Oversight can help do some of that as well, which, again, we'll take a look at in detail throughout the presentation today. So as most of you know, if you've been working with really any organization, but nonprofits and churches specifically, there's a benefit in speaking the right language. So nonprofits and churches, again, have the specialized fund accounting need, but they also do a lot of different things that normal for-profit entities might not do. So, for instance, they'll do fundraisers, they'll do campaigns, they'll do events, they'll do trips, missions trips. They'll do all kinds of things that are geared to their kind of mission, but really kind of call for a very unique set of functionality as it relates to software and things that they need to have accomplished. So imagine the scenario where you're throwing an event, right? So you're going to do a golf fundraiser. So you want to be able to have the ability to do online donations. So you set up a giving page, and you also want to track, how many people have purchased what type of package, or reserved a table, or, submitted an item for the auction or something. So you kind of need like an event management thing as well. That then leads to, okay, well, there's 1,000 people that came. Some of them donated. Some of them were old donors. Some of them are new donors. So who's who and how much did they donate and when should I follow up? That leads directly into a kind of a customer or donor management type platform to be able to track those people. With that, let's say that you also applied for like a grant to kind of fund the same purpose. So now you need to track your grant. You might also do scholarships if you're a school or something. So kind of all within the I don't want to say client or customer, but kind of congregation or kind of outside third party perspective. There's kind of a whole gambit of software that just goes along with just that. And then that all needs to integrate into your accounting solution. So you want to be able to track, your grant and all of its related income and expenses and payables and whatnot. You need to track scholarships. You need to track the donors and who, what's the income that's flowed in, but also who needs credit and who have I thanked and, all that kind of stuff. So that all needs to flow into a fund accounting solution. So really that kind of cycle of software is something that we've set out to accomplish. So for the most part, everything on the little wheel here, we do in some form or fashion, providing a donor portal, online donations, a little bit of event management, some donor relation management, and fund accounting. So all of these things together, again, there's a benefit in speaking the right language because, as again, you probably know, working with that demographic, they speak that language already. So they're coming to you saying, I need to be able to track this grant separate than the money that we have in our bank, but I've also want to, dedicate this money over here. But then we have donors donating to this thing and this program and that trip. And it's like, oh my gosh, if you don't have a system that speaks that same language, finding a kind of piecemeal solution to kind of patch in and kind of Frankenstein together can be stressful, costly, and frankly, more work than necessary. So that's why we exist. So my shameless plug into Aplos accounting. So like I mentioned, we offer a number of products here. So really what we kind of primarily focus on, again, is the fund accounting. And for those of you in the room that are experienced in this realm, which I'm sure most of you are, a fund accounting system, a fund is a self-governing set of accounts. So really in the structure of a chart of accounts, a fund is really kind of its own unique thing. It's got its own balance. It has its own income, expense, its own assets, and potentially its own liabilities as well. So that fund needs to be within the total of the organization, but also kind of stand alone. You need to be able to run reports and manage that thing independently from anything else. So here's a very basic example. So let's say you've got a checking account as a nonprofit. You've got $3,000 in there from historical fundraising. And that's just sitting there. So that's kind of there to do whatever you need to do to keep the lights on and keep the mission going forward. You then apply and receive a grant that gives you $5,000. That grant has stipulations of how they want you to allocate and spend that money. So you go to the bank, you deposit the $5,000. Now you have 8, but really you still only have 3, but you have another 5 that can be used for designated purposes. So now you have, donor designated funds and you have undonor designated funds. So how do you track that? Now, if one of your employees comes to you and says, hey, can I spend $500 on supplies? Now you need to be able to know that I have $3,000 in my general fund to say, yes, you can go spend that money, or I have $5,000 to say, what's the purpose of that expense? Does it fall within the needs of the grant? So yes, go for it. So again, kind of more focused on the transparency or accountability rather than just like the profitability of running a business. So these are some of our just things. So we've got a number of customers. We're used more in more than 100 countries. We've got close to 14,000 nonprofits that have used us, over 16 million in online donations processed last year. Capterra, Software Advice, G2 Crowd, and the Stevies all give us good marks and reviews for our service and support. So just a couple of accolades there for us. And so as it relates to what kind of products we offer to provide that, we have a couple of different options. So the most popular option here is what we call our standard accounting. So what this includes is fund accounting as well as some contributions management that goes along with it. So it's our most popular plan. It's kind of what we found to be the basics of what almost all nonprofits need, is the ability to do some fund accounting. Again, typically kind of catered to the small to medium-sized nonprofit or church, typically with 3 or less employees. What it does is it simplifies the bookkeeping, gives you that fund accounting, the core founding features. The fund accounting is all there. You can do some basic transaction entry, some accounts payable, receivable, bank integration, reconciliations, the gambit. But then it also includes the ability to set up online donation pages, so you can receive donations online. You can track your donors and how much they've given. You can do contribution statements, track designated gifts, manage recurring donations, all of that for as low as $40 per month for a single user. Or if you need multiple users, then it adds 15, bringing you up to 55 a month for all of that software. The contribution side of that, again, you get the basic fund accounting and all of that features there, but then the contribution side of things kind of snaps into the accounting to where what this does is allows you to track who's given, what did they give for, so what was the purpose of the gift, what income account and what fund and what, tag and category does that need to flow into on the accounting side. It also keeps track of who gave what, so then you can issue a contribution statement. You can also track non-tax deductible versus tax deductible donations separately. And then again, the ability to do some online donations as well. Set up a giving page, customize it however you see fit, and begin to receive donations. And that whole setup too can be done in, probably 4 minutes, getting that all set up. So if the needs of the organization exceed that kind of starter or standard zone of functionality, we also have some bigger tiers as well. So one of which would be our advanced accounting. The price for this is starts at $150 per month, but can scale based on volume, based on feature needs, based on really users, just kind of what you need. We have a sales team that's dedicated to finding the right solution for those entities. typically geared towards the mid to large size nonprofit with 3 or more employees. It includes everything that the starter and standard feature does. So all of the fund accounting and all the contributions management, that's all included as well. But what this adds is some features like automated recurring transactions, budgeting by fund, multiple accounts payable and receivable accounts, which a little preview, that's actually across the board, but we just listed here. Multi-site tracking and reporting. So if you have a multi-site church or a nonprofit organization that has multiple geographic locations, you can track those locations. Departmental, project, fundraising, accounting, and reporting. Custom reporting with tags, 990 reporting, which we'll take a look at, fixed asset tracking, and allocations. So each one of these things we're also going to go through kind of in more detail throughout today. So don't worry about having to remember what this list is. Another option here to add on is donor management. So contributions, the contributions management side that kind of comes with the the standard and advanced options can be expanded to add more features in there to better track, who's given and what you can do with your kind of donor database there. So kind of the additional features here would be to, in more detail, manage your contact database for donors. We have a donor progression dashboard, so it shows you here's your whole donor base. Here's everybody that has either donated once or multiple times or is just a contact that's attended an event. Here's everyone. It will then kind of give you some insights as to, here's some people that might have donated previously but haven't donated in a while. Maybe you should follow up with them. Here's a whole group of people that, based on their history and activity, might be good candidates to be volunteers. It'll tell you that kind of information and tell you how to basically engage with your donor database better in order to kind of push those people forward and become more involved. It also allows you to do some pledge tracking. There's a communication assistant, again, kind of suggesting what communications need to be sent to what groups of people, donor reports, list designer for contacts, online giving, email and letter builder, and then an integration with PayPal as well. Our default online donation processor is WePay, but this one also offers an integration with PayPal if you already use that or prefer that. So those are kind of our main products. So again, kind of that standard or starter accounting can be expanded into advanced accounting, and then donor management can kind of expand on the contribution side of things. So really, depending on the size of the organization, there's a solution that will probably benefit you wherever you stand in your size of organization or needs. Kind of additional to this is we have an accountant program. So this kind of gets within the realm of the oversight product, which we'll take a look at here later today. This product of oversight allows you to manage all of your organizations from one software, gets you real-time financial data. So there's no like closing entries or anything like that. Everything is updated automatically as you enter transactions. It also gives you some customized online reporting options and improves your fund accounting practices, which again, if you are not using a fund accounting system already for managing these clients, you're probably doing some workarounds that are cumbersome and might be annoying to work with. So we can help improve that. That's a little bit of a preview of what oversight looks like. Again, we're going to take a look at that here in just a little while. We also have an advisor program. So if you don't necessarily want to use us for your clients or don't have any clients, you can become an advisor. And if you know people that might benefit from it, there's some perks there. But before we move too much farther forward, let's do another poll here. So let me launch that poll number 2. So how often do you work with nonprofit or church clients? Select one of the following. Daily, I work exclusively with nonprofits and churches. Daily, I'm an in-house accountant for a nonprofit. Often, I advise a number of nonprofits. Sometimes I assist nonprofits, but we don't meet regularly or rarely. I'm just getting into the space. And just as a quick reminder, as we go through this webinar, there is a requirement that you'd have to complete 6 out of the 8 polls in order to get credit for the CPE. So if you've got this in the background and listening to it as you do your regular work, just make sure to tune in when we do these polls so you can answer it and get your CPE credit. All right, going to close this down in 3, 2, 1. Alrighty, 20% said daily, I work exclusively with nonprofits. Daily, I'm an in-house accountant. Often is 24%, 20% is sometimes, 20% rarely. Great. Okie dokie. So that was poll number 2. So let's take a look at a product demo. So I'm just going to show you kind of some general navigation, how to move around the software, how to get around some things here. So let's take a look at that now. So I'm going to log into our Oversight account here. And before I show you too much around Oversight, I'm going to dive into one of the actual clients here. I'm going to go to the Downtown Church organization. So we offer a 15-day free trial for nonprofits and churches, for anybody really. So if they wanted to get in there and kind of play around and just see how the software suits them, they can get in there for 2 weeks and test it out. And when they do, they're going to land here. So here's the dashboard. You land here. This kind of gives you just a general kind of roll-up overview of how your cash balances are doing. There's no data in here, but some income and expense, some expense breakouts. So again, kind of a blank account, but this dashboard is just kind of some high-level metrics for them to look at. And then on the left-hand side here is where they would move around the other areas of the software. So they click on accounting, then that triggers these options within accounting. So in contacts, you've got your contact list. You can group contacts into different groups. So if you have 1099 vendors or something you want to group separately, you can do that there. You can also manage your 1099s here, as well as create custom fields. So if a custom field is something that is not a normal, address, email, phone, or something like that, it's like, favorite color or, breed of dog, just depending on what other kind of information you want to glean from your contact database, you can create those custom fields there, or like anniversary date, stuff like that. In the accounts list here, we're going to be spending a lot of time here today, so I won't go too much into it now, but in the accounts areas where you'd set up your chart of accounts, you can set up your tag structure, set starting balances for the accounts, create budgets, again, manage 1099s and the 1099 categories, as well as segments. In the transactions area, here's where you do all the data entry. So we've got the register for like bank or credit card type accounts, journal entry for anything, but specifically maybe like payroll imports and that kind of thing. Accounts payable, accounts receivable, bank integration to pull transactions from the financial institutions that they need to work with, bank reconciliation to then kind of finalize that data entry, make sure that it matches the bank statement, check printing, and then setting up reoccurring transactions here as well. And then we have fixed assets. So again, kind of moving into the advanced features here, we have fixed assets, which again allows you to track all of your buildings, equipment, vehicles, any of those assets that need to be depreciated there. You can set those schedules and track that progress there. Allocations allows you to, how do I put this, kind of, allocate is a very general example, but really what it allows you to do is kind of shoot out expenses or income transactions across multiple things rather than having to split a transaction across multiple things. You can kind of create an allocation that will then kind of split it out into detail after the fact, which we're going to take a look at that a little bit later, but that's allocations. And then reports, and then payroll. Payroll is another option here. We don't provide in-house payroll, but we do have an integrated solution with Gusto. So if you have some clients that need to do some payroll, Gusto is a fantastic solution for that. And then when it's integrated with Aplos, it just automatically kind of flows in. There's very little that you have to do with each pay run. So there's that. On the left hand, underneath accounting, you've got donor management. Oops, right there. Let's see, donations. Interesting. Let me get back to this account here. Go back in here. I don't know why that's not showing. Give me 1 second. I'm going to log into a different account. Okay, so there's donor management. So in the donor management side, again, kind of expanding on that basic contribution side of things, you've got a separate list of contacts here. So these are all your donors. So you can do kind of the same thing here. Manage your contact list, group them into different groups of people, create custom fields. You can also do a list designer. So again, if you wanted to run a list of, who lives in Fresno that has donated this year over this type of amount, then you can run that kind of list and get a batch of people. In the fundraising tab, this is where you do all of the kind of monetary actions here. So a fundraising center shows you who to get in contact with and who would be good to follow up with. Here's your new donors. Here's engaged donors. Here's where you can enter new contributions, pledges, create online forms, recurring donations, all kinds of stuff there. And then the communications center is where you would, it would again kind of suggest what might be good to get in contact with. You can send them an email campaign, can send them a letter. You can, again, do a list designer thing here to kind of get the right group of people in order to send a communication to. And then donor management also has its own separate batch of reports here. And then lastly, we have e-file. So in e-file, you can start a new 990 filing. We are IRS e-file providers for the Form 990 series, specifically the 990N and the 990EZ. We've built kind of like TurboTax type little wizard tools that you can go through to complete those forms in Aplos. If you need to do the full Form 990, there's a separate feature that we have called the 990 tags, which we'll take a look at here in a little bit. So that is kind of a general navigation of how to move around the product, all the different features that we have there. And then let's take a look at oversight really quickly here too. So oversight is, again, a separate product, separate feature set than the normal kind of product. So the product is what we just took a look at. That's what people would register for. That's what they would use on a daily basis to manage all the donors and fund accounting for the organization. Oversight is kind of one step above that. So it's saying here's kind of the umbrella software, the software that says I'm up here and I need to manage, these clients down here. And each one of these has its own entirely different, its own entirely different, set of books, its own chart of accounts, its own everything there. So if I wanted to dive into that particular client and then work on there or run reports or whatever I need to do, then I can jump into them and then go back to my oversight, which will then take me up a level. And then I can go into the next client like so, and then back to oversight and then to the next one and then back to oversight. So again, people use this to manage multiple organizations that they have kind of control or authority over, or if they're providing some sort of service, then they can also use this to track, how much time they've spent on them, to do some management there. It's just kind of an overall kind of umbrella tool. All right. So that's just kind of a very general overview of how to navigate around Aplos. So let's do another poll here before we jump into the next learning objective. Yep, here. How many nonprofit and church clients do you oversee? Choices are over 100, 20 to 99, 6 to 19, 2 to 5, or 1 or not yet. Give that about 5 more seconds. All right. 12% said over 100, 0% 20 to 99, 12% 6 to 19, 32% 2 to 5, 44% 1 or not yet. Interesting that whole group of 20 to 99 would just be jumped. It's either under 20 or over 100. It's just it's a very large kind of gap there, but interesting. Alrighty, so that was poll number 3. So second learning objective here is we're going to take a look at some common chart of account structures for nonprofit and church clients and understand customization options, as well as admin options for streamlined chart of accounts setup and roll-up reporting. Really, what we're taking a look at here is we're going to review the differences between a for-profit and nonprofit chart of accounts structure, as well as how oversight can allow for independent organization chart of accounts or consolidated chart of accounts for roll-up reporting. So kind of a very brief overview of fund accounting here. So a fund is an equity account in your chart of accounts. Equity equals net assets, same thing. Really, a fund, again, is a self-balancing set of accounts. So by having it as an equity account, what it allows us to do, and really any fund accounting system to do, is have it have an end and overall balance. Because if you need to get to a balance sheet by fund, like going back to our previous example, you had that $5,000 grant, right? So in your checking account, you need to see that my checking account has $8,000, but really $3,000 of it is general, and $5,000 of it is for the grant. That's an asset balance. So now you need to have a separate asset balance in there. So now you have assets check, right? So then what if you had debt? So let's say that grant had a payable on it. So now there's a liability. So now you have an asset balance and you have a liability balance in that one particular fund, which then having those two balances means that you need to have some sort of equity there. So by having the net asset or the equity as that account there allows, again, for a balance sheet by fund as well as an income statement by fund, really any transaction type report or any type of report by fund. So when creating a chart of accounts here, asset and liability accounts are indicative of real balances. So typically you don't have assets or liabilities as accounts in excess of what you actually need them for. So for instance, down here, I've got checking, savings, invoices, receivable, inventory, and land. Those are my 5 assets. I don't have really any kind of extra or bonus accounts created because those are the assets I need to track. Same with liabilities. I owe some people, so that's accounts payable. I have a credit card, so there's a balance there. I have a property mortgage and a vehicle loan and some long-term payables. Again, I owe those amounts already. I don't have any bonus liabilities created, just hanging out there. So assets and liabilities are typically indicative of actual balances that you either have or owe. Income and expenses are more descriptive of activity. So in a realm of a nonprofit or a church or something like that, you've got income describing the way that you're receiving money. So that's contributions, that's grants, that's designated donations, pledge income, sales revenue. Again, looking at an income statement, you don't want it to just say total income was 100,000 and total expense was 80,000. You need a little bit more detail than that. So those income and expense accounts will then create categories that you then assign transactions to give you a little bit more of a description or a narrative on how that money came in and how that money went out. So the funds then add dimension. So if you didn't have funds, you're still going to have the same assets, liabilities, income, and expense. So really what a fund does is it adds dimension. It allows you to use those assets, liabilities, income, and expenses for each one of the funds that are created. So let's say that you've got contributions income here, account 4,000. In a fund accounting solution, you can have one account, so 4,000 contributions income. And like we'll take a look at here in a little bit, you would then enter a transaction, call it, $50, contributions income, and then you're going to pick what fund is that impacting. Is that going to hit my general fund? Is that missions, building, or special projects fund? You then pick the fund. So then that then assigns that income to that fund. It increases the fund balance. It also is being put into some sort of like bank account, right? So you would then increase that asset within the same fund as well. So with that transaction, you're not only recording income and an asset both increasing with that donation, but you're also saying that my equity balance is also moving up as well. So that fund balance has also increased. So in Aplos, we have a couple of reporting layers. The first of which would be the funds. So again, basic fund accounting, you've got your assets, liabilities, income, and expense, then added with funds, and now adds some dimension using those funds or net assets. Some other layers that you can add in here are Form 990 tags and customizable layers, being what we call just tags, not 990, just normal tags, or in QuickBooks, this would be like a class. And we typically bucket these into projects, locations, and departments. But really, these can be customized to be whatever you want. They can be locations, they can be missions trips, they can be people's names. I mean, they can be really anything that you need. The difference here, which we'll look at in more detail, is a fund is a net asset. It's an equity. So it has a balance. It has asset balance, liability balance, equity balance. A tag does not have an equity account. It's just an extra thing that you're attaching to a transaction in order to filter on a report. So it can get you to a transactional type report, or it can get you to an income statement, but that's about it. So really, if you're looking to a tag or a class or something to give you balances and to be kind of a pseudo fund, it's going to fall short, again, because it doesn't have the equity. It can't get you to a balance sheet by class or tag. So here is an example of how a report would look like here in Aplos. So a statement of financial position, or a balance sheet, as we typically call it. And this one is by fund. So from top to bottom, you'll see my assets, liabilities, and equity. So there's checking, savings, petty cash, AR, and the work truck fixed asset. Liabilities are the vehicle loan, as well as accounts payable. Then down below that, I have missions, general, and building fund. Now, if I had one column here, not split out into multiple columns, it would say a total, and then it would say, here's the total fund balance across all three. So that alone would be beneficial, just seeing what's my total fund balance. But a report like this is what I typically point customers to, because it not only helps kind of show the total, but also helps contextualize. You might see that you've got $34,000 in the bank account in checking, but you need to see out of the total in checking, how much is actually general, missions, or building fund. So in this kind of layout, you'd have a column for each fund. So again, kind of left to right, top to bottom, you've got general fund there. The balance being $26,500 in checking. Savings has $7,200, petty cash $9,200 or so. All the way down, it's got its liabilities, and then all the way down at the bottom, the very last fund balance there. So again, assets minus liabilities is your fund balance down there at the bottom for the general fund. Same thing goes for missions. Not as much in the bank accounts, but still has its own cash balance there to play with. So if you need to know, hey, we need to go buy plane tickets for our missions trip that we're going to do, can I spend $3,000? You can quickly look and say, yep, in the checking account we have $3,700, so we've got enough to cover that expense for missions. Go ahead and make that purchase. No liabilities for the missions fund, so that fund balance down there at the bottom, $13,000 and change, matches the asset balance there to show that particular balance sheet column. And building fund, same kind of thing, a little bit of payables there, but really just a little bit of balance in the checking accounts, and then down there, the equity balance overall. Here's what the income statement would look like in the same kind of regard. The funds are in a different order, but generally kind of same thing. You're looking at top to bottom, here's all of my income accounts, and then here's all of my expense accounts. And then from left to right, you've got the account number, account name, but then each fund. So you can run a total and just say, here's all of the income that I've got for my entire organization and all of the expense, or you can kind of parse it out into each fund being its own column here, really kind of 3 income statements in one. So you can really see how it adds dimension, right? So building fund has $11,500 in income. General fund kind of mainly funding everything with $44,000 and change, and then $11,000 or so in missions. And then expenses down there at the bottom, total expense with the net income being reported at the very bottom. Another thing that we have here at the end of our income statement is a summary showing what was the beginning fund balance at the beginning of this period, which was the beginning of 2016. So it's an old report. But at the beginning of the year, we started each fund with a balance. So building had $4,800. General had about 18, missions fund had 4,800. There was then other fund balance movements. So this line item is going to capture anything that has impacted the fund balance, but was not income or expense. This would be things like fund transfers. You already have the money. So the money's already in checking. You just want to reallocate it from one fund to the other. It's not income, it's not expense. You already have the money. You're just changing hands, changing pockets. That would be a fund transfer, which would reflect down here in the other fund balance movements. Then with the net income is what we saw up here. So that's the net income there from the bottom. So the beginning, plus or minus any other movements that have happened, plus or minus any net income or loss, leads you to the ending fund balance, which would be 12/31/16. And those beginning and ending numbers would correlate with the balance sheets as of those days as well. So if you ran a balance sheet as of 1/1/16, it would show here's your building, general, and missions fund balance. Balance sheet as of 12/31 would show you the same balances correlating with the income statement there. Let's do poll number 4. All right. Question was, which services do you typically offer nonprofit and church clients? Answers were annual audits, that was 13%, 33% Form 990 prep, 42% financial review, consulting and accounting advice or something, 63% said bookkeeping services, 25% other. Now, you probably do multiple of those things, but hopefully that percentage just reflects kind of what you mainly do. Most people would, some firms might do everything, but yeah. Okay, so let's take a look at an example here. So I'm going to take you through Aplos and how to then create these kind of categories in Aplos. So let's go to the ABC Church here. All right, so again, diving into one of my clients here, on the left-hand side, I'm going to go to Accounting, click on Accounts, and then the Account List. So right now, I've got some very basic accounts set up. We typically start each account with some very, very basic categories here. But kind of from top to bottom on the screen, you can create funds, and then down here, you have your assets, liabilities, equity, income, and expense. If you click on one of these sections, it'll then expand that section to where you can see all of the accounts within that type of group. When you create a fund here, it's actually going to create an equity account for you. So if I were to do something like missions fund, let's just do missions, then I can click save. That will then over here down in the equity create a missions fund balance. Okay. If I wanted to change the name of fund, all I have to do is click on it, and then I can change this to just say building, and I can just have it say general. I can also change the color here. So if I wanted to kind of quickly signify which fund is which, this will, I'll show you kind of in the transaction entry how this plays out. I can change the color right there. Just for the record, the color has no accounting significance, so it doesn't do anything for you. It's just an aesthetic little perk that you can do there. That changes the color. So when I go through then the funds here, I can kind of see what fund they're linked to, which we'll take a look at here. Those colors also then kind of play out in the register, which we'll take a look at here in a little bit. But when creating new accounts, all you have to do here is click on a section, and then this little kind of header bar here is what we call an account group. So this would be kind of the first kind of layer of organization that you can work with here in Aplos. So I've got two groups here for assets. I've got current assets and fixed assets. If I wanted to change the name of this, I can change this to, current asset balances or something like that. I just click into it, change the name, and click save, and that will update that group header. Then within the group, you then have the accounts. So in this, I don't like the way that that's phrased. I'm just going to get rid of that. In that group, I now have three accounts. I have checking, I have savings, and I have accounts receivable. If I wanted to create a new account, all I have to do is click this black plus button here in the group header, and that's going to add an account. So I can say this is 1015. I want this to be a register type account. I want this to be called petty cash, and this is going to be a cash activity. It's not a sub account, it's enabled, so click save. So that then creates the account, and so now I can use that account in transactions. Same with this group, all I do is click the plus button here. Let's say I wanted to create, 1550, and that is neither a register or an accounts receivable, so I'm just going to leave it to be a none type. I'm going to call this vehicles. And this is going to be a operating activity. Click save. So there you go. So there are your two asset accounts there. Again, now able to be used in transactions. Something else that you can do here is you can have sub-accounts. So like I was doing when you created the account, you can make an account a sub-account. I don't really have a need to do it in my assets here, but we'll do it here in income and expense. But if you wanted to make a sub-account, you can either click that little checkbox there and then tell it what it's a sub-account of. Or when you're on this screen, you can just grab this little 3-line thing here and kind of drag it underneath the other account to kind of indent it. And then that'll make it a sub-account of checking. So now that it's a sub-account on reports, you can either run a report that kind of consolidates the sub-accounts into the parent, showing you one roll-up total, or you can trigger an option that says show sub-accounts, and then it'll show everything. I can just move it out just as easily. And then if you wanted to move accounts within groups, you can do that just like so. Same with liabilities, same kind of thing. You can create an account group. Oh, you can add a new group down here, kind of like a folder with files in it if you're thinking about kind of an organizational term. I also kind of like to separate my account numbers based on the account grouping, just kind of makes sense to me. But liabilities will work the same way. Create a group, then create an account, and then that account can be used in transactions. Then income and expenses here, again, same kind of thing. The only difference here with income and expenses is when you create the account, you can link it to a fund. And all this means is that when you then use this account in a transaction, it will automatically default to selecting the fund that it's linked to, rather than just defaulting to the highest numerically ordered one, which in our case would be general fund balance, numbered at 3,000, which the other two are higher than that. So kind of by default, everything's going to default to general, which you can always change. Or if you wanted it to just always default to like missions or building or something like that, you can change those income and expense accounts to be linked to something else. Okay. All right. So we're going to take a look at some other kind of chart of accounts examples and tags in a little bit. But first, let's go to the next slide here. So when creating a fund accounting system from a non-fund accounting system, a couple of things to keep in mind. If you're using a non-fund accounting system, you might have these types of situations happening here. You might have more asset accounts than actual accounts, or really any type of account. We see this a lot coming from like a QuickBooks or something. If you have checking, but you want to be able to keep general missions and building money separate. Within checking, they will be sub-accounts to a parent account of checking. So now you have one bank account with 3 sub-accounts, each being its own kind of asset register, each maintaining its own separate balance, to where then on a report, you can get to the individual balances, but roll up to the total to get your total for checking. The downside of this is I just had to use a lot of words there to describe it, so it's probably a workaround. Also, when getting to things like bank reconciliation, that can become very difficult because you're having to reconcile one account statement, being checking, to 3 different assets in the accounting program. Also, it's just kind of prone to error, and if you need that, like let's say if you need missions money within your assets, now you're looking at creating a sub account to each asset account to be general versus missions versus building. So really, it's a tremendously large chart of accounts to work around for the lack of fund accounting. Which brings me to my next workaround here, is a large chart of accounts with multiple sub account structures to account for that kind of variability. So, let's say you've got your chart of accounts. Let's say it's 50 different accounts. And with a fund accounting system, you can use that same 50 accounts, but just pick what fund. And now it's like you have a separate chart of accounts for each fund. But with the lack of it, you might have to create sub-accounts for each one of those 50 to be different 3. So now you're looking at maybe 200 different accounts to be the parent account, as well as the 3 subs for each account needed to be general, building, or missions. Another workaround here would be only tracking funds as classes using a business accounting software. So something like that would be, again, would get you to like an income statement. But if you needed to run a balance sheet, it would be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to get to, which that mean you also need to create some equity workarounds. So like to just paint a picture, I've helped a lot of nonprofits through this, which is a common example of let's say they just have 2 funds, general and missions. So with each one of these, they would then have the sub-accounts created. So now they have multiple assets, again, kind of superfluous accounts that are actually needed because of the lack of fund accounting. They're then using the classes to track the income and expense, which are then recorded into the sub-account registers. But then to manually update it, they then run an income statement, see how much was done by class. They then post an adjusting entry to move it out of the net income for the year, move it into a different equity account, which then separates the equity. And then now on the balance sheet, they're having to compare a subtotal of sub accounts to the equity to make sure that everything balances out. It's a tremendous amount of work, really, for just not having something very simple in the software, which is accommodating for the fund accounting stuff. Let's do poll number 5. Poll number 5. Okay, a few more seconds there. All right. So what do your clients have the most difficulty tracking in their accounting? 4% said grants, 4% said departments or projects, 20% fundraising campaigns, 56% restricted funds, and 16% other, which I would guess grants, departments, projects, fundraising campaigns all kind of are very, very similar to the aspect of tracking restricted funds. So really, 84% of nonprofits have a hard time tracking restricted funds. So yeah, good to know. Alrighty. So now let's take a look at tags. So we kind of went through fund accounting, how we handle that. We're going to take a look at some transactions here in a little bit. But in addition to the accounts, you've got accounts and account groups and sub-accounts and funds. That, again, is kind of pervasive across all of our software. Every level of our software can do that. We also have some additional stuff here, which would be tags. A tag is, again, kind of equivalent to a class in QuickBooks. But depending on your level of Aplos, we can allow you to have multiple kind of buckets or categories of tag. And then we also have something that's a 990 tag, so it's even a little bit more different. So let's take a look at the two there. As well, let's just go through this real quick. So kind of what this allows you to do is become more granular in your reporting. So a balance sheet by fund, or a statement of financial position, and an income statement by fund are, again, kind of general. Those are always offered. If you use the funds within our software, you can get to those two reports right there. You can also then get to, if you use the tags, you can get to a specific 990 report for the full form 990. You can also in Aplos budget by tag and or by fund. So you can get to a specific budget report by that tag or fund. And then for the tags, you can get to income statements and transaction type reports. You can also do contribution statements based on fund, purpose, tags, anything like that. So let's take a look at some ways to do these tags here. So over here in my account list, we took a look through funds and some accounts. Now let's take a look at tags. So in tags here, again, we kind of default people to fundraisers, projects, and departments, but these can be customized for really just about anything. You can rename this to be any kind of category you want. The only one that can't be renamed is custom, which again is just kind of a default layer there. And then you have 990. So let's just kind of take from left to right. So let's say we do have fundraisers, but I want to call this something different. I want to call this campaigns. Update. So let's say throughout the year, I'm going to do a golf fundraiser. And then later I'm going to do a, get out of there. I'm going to create a new one, a harvest, if I can spell, festival add. So what this is doing is adding the categories. So really it's just adding them down here. You can always rename them. You can disable them if you don't need that particular tag anymore. But now when you enter a transaction, you can record not only what's the register that it's being put into, what's the income or account involved, what's the fund that it's increasing or decreasing. You can also pick what tag it is. So now you can pick it's for the golf fundraiser campaign. Now let's go up here to projects. Let's say I want to call this locations. So let's say I'm a multi-site organization and I have 4 locations. I'm going to do north, east, south, and just kidding, west. Okay. So now I have these up here. So now, again, when I enter a transaction, I can do not only accounts involved, fund involved, campaign tag involved. I can now also select what location it was for. So I can say this was for the Harvest Festival at my south location. Now I have departments. Let's say I want to call this teams. So in teams, I have marketing, I have ops, I have support, I have outreach, whatever you want to call here. So now I can say that this is for my, I've got fundraiser income in my checking account for my missions fund, using my Harvest Festival campaign at my South location for my outreach team. So again, you're picking all of these different categories as you go, so that on a report you can get to show me an income statement for what has hit this combination of things. Again, very, very granular reporting possible with these different tags here. And custom works the same way. You just can't rename the category. So this would kind of what I'd suggest when I help people design chart of accounts is I'd say take care of these 3, have these kind of be the main 3 that you need to do some reporting for. This would then be kind of a catch-all. Also, where this comes into play is in thinking about what to kind of use these categories for. Again, a fund has a balance. So at the end of the day, your money is split by fund. No matter what you do, you're going to split it. You're going to have a separate checking balance for each fund. So that can get cumbersome really, really quickly. Trust me, I've worked with thousands of nonprofits, and I see across the board, I see ones with 1 fund and I see some with hundreds of funds, which is just a nightmare to keep track of, because now you have a checking account with 100 individual balances within it to show what someone donated 6 years ago for when you buy new carpet for the sanctuary. Now there's $47 there that you then need to hang on to. So you can be too granular with the funds. So when kind of designing a system here, you want to keep in mind, what do I need? What do I absolutely need a balance for? And what can I not necessarily have a balance for, but maybe I want to run an income statement, maybe even a multi-year income statement, but I don't really need a balance. I just need to have some data on it. This would be where a tag can come in handy. So let's say you've got a missions fund, your church, you have a missions fund. That's for global and local outreach. It's for the mission staff. You've got a missions guy that does kind of the coordination there, but then you also do fundraisers and you do missions trips, right? So you want to track, we're going to Haiti, we're going to Africa, and we're going to Romania as missions trips. So you want to track how much has come in fundraising wise for that trip. You want to track how much you've spent. So what, you've bought plane tickets, you've bought supplies and paid a guide or whatever, you've had all these kind of correlated income and expenses. So you need to track how well you're doing per each missions trip, but it's all kind of flowing in and out of the missions fund balance, right? So that's where you'd have kind of the missions fund kind of eating all those income and expenses for all the different things within it. And for those things within it, you can use tags to kind of further classify what the money is being received or spent for. Another example would be if you have things like departments or teams or ministries, that kind of thing where, per year, things might reset. So you've got, like an outreach team, you've got a marketing team, a development team, a support team, services, sales, kind of speaking in terms of how we run our business here. You've got all these different departments or teams, each one with its own budget, its own spend, its own costs, its own income that it drives, all of that different stuff. But at the end of the year, really, if they go over budget, it's general money. It's not designated. You're kind of self-allocating those balances out and budgeting for those things. So I'd say if you have anything like that to where the budget or the spending and the balance kind of resets at the end of the year, or at least you have full control over it to say that's no longer, youth ministry money. Now it's like kids ministry money. You can kind of shift around. You might not want to create a fund for it. You might just want to do a tag to where then you can budget specifically for it. You can track income and expense, but really at the basic level, it's all still general or undesignated money. You're just kind of further classifying it per department, team, or ministry. Okay. So those are the tags. So then in the 990 area, this is completely separate. So this is still a tag in the realm of it's a it's a category that you're kind of attaching to a transaction, but this is geared towards the 990 categories. So this is more speaking to nonprofits, not necessarily churches, because churches don't need to file that. But all of these categories here are the different categories that the IRS uses for the full Form 990 in terms of income and expenses. It's got them grouped into different things here. And then across the top is program service management and general fundraising. So really what this is that it's a completely separate chart of accounts that people would need to keep track of in order to file that Form 990. So instead of mimicking these categories, because chances are not a lot of people are going to need the category of gross income from fundraising or gaming, you might just want contributions income. So instead of mimicking your chart of accounts off of this kind of very static design, you can have your chart of accounts customized however you want. But then these categories here, what you do is when you click on them, you click on something like all other contributions, gifts, and grants. And then you're going to say that 990 category, this one right here, can be used when I use the account of contributions income or building grant income or interest earned. So now when I choose that account, it's going to say, do you want to use this tag? If I've selected multiple 990 tags for one income account or expense account in my chart of accounts, it'll say, here are your options. So instead of, basically what you're doing is when you record a transaction, you're picking your account, your fund, your tags, but then it's also going to say, what 990 category does this need to fall into as well? So then you pick whichever one applies there. So really you're kind of maintaining two separate chart of accounts in there. It's just, we call it a 990 tag. And then later on your reports, you can run a designated Form 990 revenue or 990 expense report, which then based on your activity would then lump everything into the particular tags there that you've selected, as well as across the top. Again, this is a blank account, but it would have the management versus program versus fundraising, those three categories as well, showing the difference. Okay. So that is tags. Again, kind of it's a lot to digest. So kind of as a basic overview, again, in your chart of accounts, assets, liabilities, income, and expenses are going to be pretty similar to what you would normally do in a non-fund accounting system, but then your equity is going to be created as funds here in Aplos. And then when you record a transaction, you'd pick the accounts and the funds involved. So the system knows then how to produce reports, a balance sheet, transaction list, or income statement based on what accounts you've used as well as what fund it impacted. And then bonus to that, we have tags here. So these three categories of tags can be renamed to kind of be whatever groupings you want here. Custom is a fourth category that can be used as well. And then the 990 category is something that you can do in addition that would then allow you to kind of group all of your income and expenses into those 990 categories to eventually produce that report without it having to kind of change the way that you do your day-to-day accounting structure. All right, let's do poll number 6. Poll number 6 launching right now. The question is, how comfortable are you in advising your clients on how to read their nonprofit reports? Very, somewhat, not very, or not at all. All right, 3, 2, and 1. 39% very confident, 39% somewhat confident, 17% not very, 4% not at all confident. Thank you for being honest there. I appreciate that. Again, 7 years I've been doing this, and I didn't know accounting at all when I started. Came in completely green. I was doing some very, very basic bookkeeping when I first started for a different company. Anyways, kind of had to learn from the ground up. So I learned all of my accounting in the fund accounting world. So I never learned classically and then had to kind of additionally learn fund accounting. I just learned fund accounting, and then the business stuff came along on the side. But it's different. I mean, especially for people that don't work with nonprofits very often. You know, you took a government and nonprofit type course when you were studying for your CPA exams like 20 years ago, but it's weird. It's a lot of work, and all the education on it is very stuffy. So it can be difficult to work with. Hopefully this presentation helps a little bit in that regard. But okay, enough from me. Let's get back to this. So real quick, before we get back into this, before we get into the transaction entry, I want to show you some examples of what we just kind of talked about here, maybe in some different ways. So this is a sample file that I've created with some different charts of accounts here. So really kind of what we're looking at here, we don't really need that. We can get rid of that group there, nonprofit. So let's take a look at how this would kind of manifest. So this is what I typically prepare when I import a chart of accounts into an Aplos account. Is I'll create all the accounts here in Excel, and then I import it. But what I'm doing here is I'm kind of designating everything. I'm saying, here's the account numbers, here's the account names, here's what type of account it is, here's the group that it's going to fall into, here's the parent account number if it needs one. So like the accumulated depreciation for buildings, I want it to be a sub account of 1500, which is here right above it. Same with 1510, I want that to be a sub account here. So that kind of thing. I'm creating the liabilities. So here's credit card, accounts payable, notes payable. Again, kind of grouping, in the hundreds or 10 spot, just kind of categorically what I think makes sense to kind of split those accounts up a little bit. And as you can see, assets and liabilities, again, are typically pretty similar to what you would do in really any accounting software. The difference here is with the funds. So now I've got 3 funds. I've got general, grant fund, and other designated fund balance. So a couple of different funds there. And then down here, I've got a couple of income accounts. So contributions income, grant income, department income, program, and fundraiser income. Now, notice what I'm not doing here. What I'm not doing is I'm not creating an income account for each program, each fundraiser, each department, each grant, or each type of contribution. All I have is some general basic accounts here, 5 categories, because those are the 5 types of income that I need to track. The granularity, the detail then is coming from my different tags that I have created up here. So these would be the tags that I would then create. I'd have departments, I'd have programs, and I'd have fundraisers. So again, instead of having a jogathon income, car wash income, spring banquet income, and harvest festival income, I have fundraiser income. And if I want to know how much was jogathon versus spring banquet, I would then run a income statement based on one of those tags and not have it necessarily have to increase the number of accounts that I need to keep track of, right? Same kind of thing down here in expenses. So I have my salary expenses, right? I've got ops expenses. So those are probably going to be pretty similar to what you'd normally set up. But then I've got what my different grant expenses might be. So again, I'm not, let's say like fundraiser expenses would be like supplies. So what I'm not doing is I'm not creating a harvest festival supplies, jogathon supplies, sales supplies, success supplies. I'm not creating those things. I'm creating one supplies account. But then again, I'm creating tags, and I'm picking that tag along with the account whenever I record a transaction, which recording transactions is what we'll take a look at here in just a minute. So there's one example. So this would be kind of a very basic example of what a nonprofit might do. Create these types of accounts here, a couple funds, some very general and overview type income and expense accounts, and then with a couple of tags here to kind of gain some detail. Now let's take a look at a church version. So same kind of thing. I just changed the names a little bit. So instead of a department, they have ministries. Instead of programs or something, they have missions trips. Instead of something else, they have locations. So that's kind of similar to what we just created over there in Aplos. So again, very general accounts. So in the accounts way, they have tithes and offerings, designated gifts, ministry revenue. So instead of kids income, youth income, college income, they just have ministry revenue and then tag what particular tag or ministry that it hit. And then same with the expenses. Again, very kind of broad categories, but then the detail is gained in the tags. Now, this gets into something that we could probably spend a whole hour on, but there are some limiting factors to the way that we do what we do categorically, and that's just the nature of the beast. I mean, you can't really solve everyone's problem with software. I mean, chart of accounts designs and the reporting needs of nonprofits will vary from entity to entity. So what we've done is tried to make it very easy to swallow for the majority of organizations. Now, there are some that have more detailed needs. For instance, let's say that this church has multi-site locations, but they want to see, they want to be able to budget for their income and expenses very granularly for each location. They want to have each one kind of have its own breakout per location. If the reporting or the budgeting or the entry, if anything ever kind of like breaks in the process, then you can always reincorporate one of these things back into the chart of accounts. The only downside is it just extends the list of the chart of accounts. So it kind of adds numerically, it just adds a number of accounts that you need to keep track of. But it still gets you a lot of the detail, and it still gives you fund accounting. So it's already 10 times better than the alternative. But here's what a version would be if I had to reincorporate the locations back into the income and expense side of the chart of accounts. So you'll notice there that I've created a number of sub-accounts. So all of these .1, .2, .3, .4s, I've then basically taken all of those kind of parent accounts, and I've added a sub-account being each different version. So I have the same kind of expense account here, but then one created for Northeast, Southwest. So if I wanted to run an income statement that just shows, this version, which is very truncated, then I can do that. But if I wanted to then see, okay, yeah, but how much of my, building expense was for South versus North, then kind of comparatively, I can run an income statement that then expands all of the sub-accounts here, which would then show me, here's all of my building expenses, and each one has how it's hit each different location there. So again, this would only be if you kind of hit a barrier with the reporting as it stands on kind of filtering and cross-filtering between tags. Every once in a while, we'll run into an org that needs a little bit more detail in the actual listing of accounts here. So we can reincorporate that. But anyways, just wanted to show you kind of some quick examples of how that might manifest in a chart of accounts design. Again, if you have any questions, just let me know. But we'll move on to some transaction entry now and take a look at that. So that learning objective here, reviewing common transaction activity, including transaction imports, journal entries, so on and so forth. We're just going to take a look at every type of way to enter a transaction here in Aplos now that we have some categories set up. Okay, let me take a drink real quick. So in the transactions area, we have 4 kind of primary entry screens. The first of which is going to be a register. So a register, this screen is going to be used for any asset or liability account that I have created as a register, which means it's going to just basically have this screen available to it, which is an area to enter a transaction as well as see a transaction history and have a running balance. Typically, what I recommend is to set these up for banks and credit cards, because those are the ones you're going to get statements for. Any register is going to be able to be reconciled. So again, anything that you receive a statement for, probably beneficial to set it up here as a register. And here's where I can change between my registers. So if I wanted to work on checking, I'd select that. If I wanted to bounce over to the credit card, I can select that. Let's go to checking. And then I would enter a deposit or a payment. So it's data entry at this point. So you'd enter a date and say it's today. I'm going to pay Aplos for software. I'm going to pay $50. I want that to hit my, bank fees account. in my missions fund. And then the $9.90 category that applies is, take your pick. I'm going to say fundraising, and then my tags. So now I can select that this is for my North Campus and my ops department, and then submit. So what that does is it saves the transaction here. It then adds it to the transaction history. I didn't have a balance in here to begin with, so that's why it shows the balance of -50. But then my little fund chart here at the bottom shows -50. Let's add some money in here so we actually have something to play with. So let's say checking had 5,000 in each, 5, 4, 3. And let's go back to transactions here. So let's say that I had those starting balances in there. I started with 12,000, and then there was a $50 payment that got added, which is that one that we just entered, which decreased the overall balance. So now that's not 12,000, it's 11,950. And then down here in my fund balance chart, this is telling me that within the 12,000 or 11,950, I actually have 3 fund balances, and these are those. So within that, I have 4,000 designated to building, 5 to general, and now 2,950 because of that $50 transaction to missions. So if you had those starting balances and those fund balances entered for each one of these registers, you can quickly bounce around to how much is in checking, how much is in savings and petty cash per fund. And that's where those kind of colors come into play, because if each one of those bars is black, it's kind of hard to read. But if you know missions is red, general's blue, building is green, you can kind of quickly get to, oh, okay, we're cool. We have a number of dollars stashed away for building. Go ahead and make that purchase or whatever decision you need to make. So that's the register. Again, anything that you typically receive a statement for is what I would suggest, any sort of bank or credit card account. You then have journal entry. So journal entry is just raw debit and credit. So date, memo, account, fund, debit, credit, tags. That's it. Typically what I recommend for people is you would use journal entry for any transaction that doesn't fit in another screen. So if it's not a payable, it's not a receivable, and it's not a register, you can use journal entry for it. Works the same way, debit and credit. The only trick that you'll need to keep in mind here is you are able to, you will not be able to post a journal entry that is out of balance by debit or credit, but also debit and credit by fund, because again, a fund is a self-balancing set of accounts. So if you're going to enter a journal entry, you have to make sure that the debits in each fund match the credits in each fund. And if that doesn't line up, it'll tell you down here at the bottom, telling you what funds are out of balance. Some other stuff that you can do here in the journal entry screen would be a fund transfer. So again, if you're kind of just changing hands, you want to turn general money into missions money or missions money into building money, whatever you want to do there. You already have the money. You just want to reallocate it. Here's where you would do that. You'd select, I want to take money from checking. Let's just say this is fund transfer today. Within my checking account, I want to transfer $1,000 from my building fund to my general fund. It'll tell you you can do that. You've already got 4,000 in there, so that's a good transfer. And then hit transfer. So now if I go back over to my register for checking, I can see that transfer occurred there. It was a $0 movement, so my balance didn't change, right? Because I still have the same amount of money. I'm just reallocating it, but my fund balance chart is now much different. Building has gone down 1,000. General has gone up 1,000. In journal entry, you can also import payroll. We have a couple of different options here. If you use Sage or ADP, PayCycle, or Pathways Payroll, you can import payroll files from those providers. You can also import journal entries. So if you want to download a template here, you can download an Excel template, which will then show you how to kind of format a journal entry import. So if you wanted to throw in some journal entries, again, just make sure that they balance debit and credit, but then they also need to balance by fund. But then you can upload that transaction file to Aplos in order to get those transactions in there faster. Accounts payable is where you would enter anything that you've accrued but haven't paid yet. So again, just kind of a general bill pay. We've just added the ability to do negative values so that you can do kind of a net movement. So if you owed 100, but they discounted it by 20, or you had some sort of credit to your name, then you can decrease the payable by $20 to make it a net of 80. So you can do that now, and you can use any type of account. So now you can use really any type of account you want to offset that payable. But then once you create this payable, it then has it down here in the pay bills section, which will then get you to an aging report if you have some stuff that's aging out there. And then once you've paid everything off, it'll end up in this history or closed fully paid section down here at the bottom. Same goes for accounts receivable or AR. Same thing. This is just money that is owed to you that you have not received yet. So same thing, you'd enter who you're invoicing, what's it for, what's the amount, are there any discounts involved, any scholarships or anything like that. All the split lines down here at the bottom, which will then put it into the receive payments area down here, to where then you would then say that I received the check, I'm going to receive these invoices using this check, receive it, and then it ends up here in the history. Now, when you receive or pay the AP or AR, then you're going to pick what bank account that it's impacting as well. So that will automatically create a transaction over here in the register, increasing or decreasing that register with that AP or AR. Bank integration here is mainly a time-saving tool, but it's a link that you can do with your financial institution for both banks and credit cards in order to download transactions and make that transaction entry a lot faster. You still need to assign an account and a fund and tag and everything like that, but it'll, one, help accuracy. So it'll just download anything that's cleared the bank. So no duplicate transactions, anything like that. It'll also help kind of the data entry. So it'll autofill the date, the payee, the description, all that kind of bank data that comes over will automatically get flowed in. And we have two options here, Plaid or Finicity. Both are just different providers. So some banks are offered by certain ones. Sometimes one bank will work better with another. So two different providers for that service. Once you've entered transactions or integrated them using this bank integration, then you can do bank reconciliation, which I'm sure all of you have been through. Very general process here of entering what the statement ending date and balance is. You would then start the reconciliation, which would take you to a separate page of all your transactions, to where then you'd check the box on which ones have cleared. And once everything that has been checked off to clear matches the amount that's needed to get to your ending balance, then you can finish the reconciliation, which would then lock down those transactions so you can't change them going forward. You can change certain things like the account or tags or funds, because that doesn't mess with the reconciliation. The only thing that you won't be able to change is the date to a certain extent, and then the amount. That is locked down. And then if you have certain transactions that will kind of reoccur or happen more often, then you can do this recurring transaction to set up a reoccurring alert or payable or receivable or a register transaction. One option here that you also have, I showed you how to do the import payroll option here, but again, we have an integration with Gusto. So if you use Gusto, that is a more integrated import. So you don't need to retrieve a file from Gusto and then import it. It's just when you have it set up, and I've got some screenshots that I'll show you here. Once you have everything kind of set up and mapped to your chart of accounts, then every time you run payroll, it's just going to say, hey, here's your pay run. Do you want to import this? You click yes, make any changes to the allocations that you need to, and then click import. That then flows into journal entry, keeping all of your payroll up to date automatically. All right. So that is the transactional side of Aplos. One quick thing I did want to show you is, we're not going to spend too much time on it, but just the contributions entry here in the fundraising area. Again, if you use us to track your contributions, you can go to this entry screen here and click Add Contribution. You can add a list here. So here's the person that donated. So let's say Alex donated an amount. The purpose is going to be whatever kind of categorical purpose that you have created, which is separate than your chart of accounts. Again, kind of a whole separate webinar topic there, but I'm just going to say this is a general donation. I have not acknowledged it yet, so I'm going to select that. He donated the 25th. The amount was $20. Any notes or expense amounts or NTD values that you want to associate, and then save and close. That will then create a donation for Alex using that purpose. And so now Alex now has that amount on his record. So I can go print Alex a contribution statement, which has that donation on it from Aplos. And then the separate thing that you can do here is you can create a deposit. So let's say you entered 15 donations, and now you want to say that you took 10 of those to go be a bank deposit. You can then go over here to deposits. You can say create deposit. That will then either trigger you to enter, the donations associated with that deposit, or back here in the contribution screen, you can click to this little box here to say which ones you want to group into a deposit, and then create that deposit right there, which will then flow into the register and put in the deposit for that total amount. Even though it's been multiple donations, it flows in as one deposit. So that keeps your bank reconciliation really clear. It's a nice little workaround as opposed to having like an undeposited funds type setup, because that can be kind of hard to manage sometimes, but people still use it. Even people in Aplos, we've recommended people do undeposited funds type solutions before. Just kind of depends on the org and what their needs are. Yeah. So that's kind of the other area of where to enter a transaction. So again, mostly it's happening over the accounting side, but then you can also enter contributions here in donor management. So a little bit more on the Gusto real quick. So in the Gusto integration, again, this is all kind of that same screenshot from this area here. But for the most part, you can sign up for a free Gusto account for 3 months. After that, they have their own pricing, just kind of depending on volume and how many employees you need to pay and manage. And then once you have it linked, basically what you'll do is you'll run your first payroll. That will then pass through information to Aplos, and will then recognize here are the different kind of categories that you have set up in Gusto or that you used. So all the different benefits and withholdings and that kind of thing. You would then map all of those categories to what Aplos account or accounts you want them to hit. And then the next time that you run payroll, all you do is click import over there on the import button, and that would then flow into Aplos as its own deposit, journal entry, keeping your accounting up to date. So very, very seamless. I mean, the hardest part is going to be setting up the Gusto side, and I've never seen a better payroll system than Gusto. They are fantastic. So the setup over there should be super easy. Their support is free. They're fantastic to work with. So you'd set it up over there, run payroll, that then flows into Aplos. You do a little bit of mapping, which again, our support team can help with as well. And then after that point, you're off to the races. All you do is click import, next, and there you have it. There's a journal entry ready to go. All right, let's do poll number 7. What is your biggest obstacle with managing nonprofit clients? Data entry is time consuming. Client does not have an accounting experience, not having a real-time access to bookkeeping, time-consuming workarounds to track funds, or other. Gonna give that about 5 more seconds. 3, 2, and 1. All right. Okay, 8% said data entry is time consuming. 46% says client does not have accounting experience. Yep, that is a familiar metric. 13% not having real-time access to bookkeeping. 17% time consuming workarounds to track funds. 17% said other. Okay, we are in the home stretch here. Got about 25 more minutes in this webinar. One more poll. The last learning objective here, what we're going to take a look at here is how to understand how to improve practice efficiency. Basically, I'm just going to show you Aplos oversight. So what we've gone through is a very, very high level overview of who we are as a company, as products, what we provide, how we do fund accounting, how fund accounting is important. We also looked at kind of categorically how to set up a chart of accounts and maybe use some different tags and funds and categories to kind of create what you need for that nonprofit or church. Now let's take a look at you then as a kind of oversight or bookkeeper, kind of, again, the umbrella kind of software user, how that kind of then can help you keep track of things, okay? So here is oversight. First of all, oversight is technically a separate product, but it's free. There's no cost associated with oversight unless you choose to pay the invoice for your clients. So let's say that I am an oversight user, and on my dashboard here, I oversee all of these organizations. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 organizations, with testing just being kind of a play account that I can mess around with as needed. From this dashboard, I can jump into each particular account. So I can go to ABC Church, and now I'm in ABC Church's account. I can navigate across all of their books. I can run reports. I can enter things, whatever access that you have. And then if I want to return to oversight, I would go back to my dashboard, click back to oversight. That would then bring me back up, and then I can bounce into the next one. I can also manage. So manage would allow you to click on this, and you're going to view this kind of really general kind of management console here, showing you the organization details, when they signed up, what's their expiration. You can add notes. So if you wanted to take a note on, just details of the client, you can put that in there, right there. You can also set up tasks, which I'll show you here in a second. But let's say you had 3 tasks per client each month, and that is entering transactions, reconciling the bank, and pulling reports. So I can say that March, I'm done with everything. But for April, I've entered transactions and I've reconciled, but I've not yet pulled the reports for them. So I'm going to leave that unchecked. You're then going to see time logged. So in the month, I've logged 50 minutes in that particular account, me being Alex. So per user that you have on Oversight, you can see who's kind of docked what time in each one. And then here are the users of that particular organization. But that's the management kind of side of things. If I go back to the home screen here, or dashboard, that'll get me there. And over here in the very right, I can add different columns that I want to see. So maybe I don't necessarily need to see kind of a roll-up revenue or expense, but I do want to see their time logged, and I want to see task status, and I want to see the exchange rate that's been applied, and the roll-up reports. So you can change kind of what columns you see here. So kind of from left to right, roll-up reports means if I need to run a report, like a balance sheet or an income statement at the Oversight level, I want these, 7 or 6 organizations to take all of their financial data and roll it up into one report. That's what that's going to do. So this would be beneficial for the organizations that need to oversee, like we have one of our clients is the Georgia State Parks Association, so one entity, but 50 or so different chapters, all filing one 990, but 50 different chapters. So what he does is he has each 50 of the organizations set up as their own Aplos account. So they're all listed here on his dashboard. He then kind of helps manage each one, and they all keep their separate books. They all have one chart of accounts that he's designed at the Oversight level and then locked down so that none of them can mess with their chart of accounts. So what that allows him to do is come here and say roll up reports for everybody. He goes over here to the reports section of Oversight and says run a balance sheet. That balance sheet would then pull all of the balance sheets from all of those consolidated organizations with all of their chart of accounts put together and sum them into here's checking and here is the total checking balance across the entire organization, even though there's 50 chapters. So again, super beneficial for someone that needs to kind of roll up reports across multiple organizations. Something else that kind of helps that roll up here is an exchange rate. We also get a lot of nonprofit or different clients that have operations in multiple countries. So they might have operations in Peru and, Haiti. Maybe they're like a missions organization. So those two both have local currencies that they're managing. But then at the Oversight or the top level, they need to roll their U.S. operations consolidate with those local currencies as well. So what you'd do here is you'd say, I want this to be, this symbol, and I want this to be that symbol. And you'd get the daily exchange rate. So those are the current exchange rates. And then when you run the report, it will then change all of those figures from that individual account for the local currency, apply the exchange rate, then changing it into U.S. figures, which would then produce the consolidated balance sheet or income statement, all being converted from whatever currency you're working with. All right. So then lastly, that kind of related to that management console, here's where I can see how much time has been logged. So let's change this to April. I want to see how much has been logged this month. So there's my current status. Here's how much time I've logged in each one of these clients so far this month. Here's the different task status. So as I complete different tasks, I can check those off and see where each person is. If you wanted to manage your tasks up here in the top, you can click Manage Tasks. This is where you can say, here's all the different things I want to see. I want to see enter transactions, reconcile the bank, and pull reports. And that would be it. And then if you ever wanted to add new organizations, you can click the top button here and say, this is going to be, First Church. And I want them to have accounting plus contributions management. And then here's where the cost thing comes into play. So you can either choose to pay the invoice, and that will then bill you. So you'll have a credit card on file. Anybody that you've chosen to pay for would be consolidated into one charge on your credit card per month. Or you can say, nope, it's your cost. And that will then push the cost to the administrator of the organization that you're about to add. And then they will pay for it themselves. There are some volume discounts that's available for Oversight users that choose to pay the invoices, but I don't have any data on that. You'd have to contact our sales team if you want to learn more about that. But again, if you use Oversight, but then they all pay their individual invoices, then you pay nothing. Oversight itself does not cost anything. And you can add multiple organizations here at a time. Just click however many organizations you need. Second church, third church, third with an I, so on and so forth. So then on the left-hand side, the navigation is similar but reduced. So you can have your own kind of contacts for the oversight here, but really this is not roll up from the organizations. This is just the oversight contact list. But then the accounts here is where you can create a chart of accounts that then can be locked down. And so that if you wanted all of your clients to use one kind of boilerplate nonprofit chart of accounts, you can create that. Then when you create a new entity from oversight, it'll automatically be created with that chart of accounts. So it saves you a lot of time from having to sit there and create the same thing over and over again. Once it's created, then you can either choose to lock it down or not. So if at that point you just want to start with a kind of a template, but then they can kind of delete or add or change from there, then don't lock it down. Otherwise, you can click this little gear icon here and say lock down, which will prevent any sub-organization from changing their chart of accounts and settings. So you basically say, nope, these are the categories that you need to use. There you go. Okay. And then reports, again, is where you can run a consolidated income statement or balance sheet report, also a consolidated Form 990 revenue or expense account. In donor management, same kind of thing. You can run a consolidated report for the contact list, but that's about it. It doesn't really make sense at the moment for us to do the consolidated contribution statements. Those would have to be done individually per sub-organization. The other thing you can do here from Oversight is e-file. So if you wanted to e-file for multiple organizations, you can just create a new 990 filing at any time. That's more based on the EIN that you enter. So it doesn't really matter if you file for 1 or 100 different people. You just enter the EIN when you start the filing. That'll create a new filing and then submit from there. All right. So that is a little bit about Oversight. So let's do the last poll here. How important is it for you to serve nonprofit and church clients? It's kind of a trick question. Very important, somewhat important, not really important. All right, 3, 2, and 1. 88%, very important. 8%, somewhat. 4%, not really. No worries. Okay, here we go. So all of that summed up to Aplos has award-winning support. So everything that I just covered today, from the company to the products to the pricing to the suite to the oversight to the how do you do transaction entry to the how do you set up to chart of accounts help to fund accounting help, everything. We have free support, and our support team is award-winning. They're fantastic. And I'm not just saying that, I'm not just being their leader, but I really, truly enjoy what we strive to do here. Just to kind of peek behind the curtain, with the exception of only a couple of them, most of the people that we've hired for support are not accountants. And I don't mean to say that to scare you, but they all can, I mean, they're all pretty dangerous when it comes to accounting, but they're all learned accountants, which means we hired people that were, first of all, friendly, supportive, just by nature. I mean, you can see all their smiling faces there. We want to hire good people that care about the demographic, the client base. So all of our people are extremely helpful. They've learned all of the accounting and the software support, all that different stuff. So they can help a tremendous amount if you have questions. And we're typically available about 8 or 9 hours throughout the day. So if you ever need anything, live chat, email, phone support, we also have an online support center, which is kind of just a knowledge base that you can search for. And we do these webinars and personalized demos quite often. So if you need anything at all, feel free to contact us and we'd be happy to help. But as a recap for today, what we did is we took a look at an overview of Aplos as a specialized solution for nonprofits and church, for nonprofit and church clients, and the management platform available for professional accountants and bookkeepers. We reviewed some common chart of accounts structures for nonprofit and churches and looked at some customization options like tags, 990 tags, as well as some admin options for streamlined chart of accounts setup and roll-up reporting at the oversight level. We also looked at how to implement dimensional reporting using tags, creating popular customizations for specialized nonprofit reporting, including the 990 report, and then looked at how to increase and improve practice efficiency using oversight to track time, tasks, currency conversions, imports, automated transactions, and allocations. All right. So as a recap for the CPE stuff, you had to have at least answered 6 out of the 8 polls during the webinar. If you didn't, that chance is over. My apologies. But you also had to be present for at least 100 minutes of the presentation. We still have a pretty good amount of people in the room, so I think that has been accomplished as well. The last things that you'll need to do here is complete the evaluation exit survey at the end of the webinar, which again, when the webinar ends, that will automatically trigger. So don't close everything out and walk away. You have to do that exit survey. And then in that exit survey, you also need to confirm the name that should appear on your CPE certificate in order to get credit. Okay. And also as another quick reminder, this is being recorded or was being recorded. So if you need to see it again, we're going to send it out via email once everything has been kind of polished and put onto YouTube. We will also give you the slide deck if you want that. So now let's open it up for some Q&A time. I saw a couple of things kind of pop through, but if you have any questions about really anything that we talked about today, feel free to shoot those through. We've got about 10 minutes here to go through some stuff. And if I can't answer anything, then I'll do my best to kind of follow up after the webinar. Okay. Okay, so clarify the difference between donations and contributions and how you would enter them in both accounts and donor data. Good question. So like I quickly took a look at how to enter a contribution, but really what it is when you do a contribution entry in Aplos, you're not using an income account or a fund or a tag. What you're using is called a purpose. We have, generally it's 2 separate products. You have accounting and donor management kind of side of things. If someone just uses donor side of Aplos, not anything related to accounting, it doesn't really make sense for us to say what's the income account and fund and tag you want to use. So to kind of streamline it, we created these things called purposes, which is basically just what are they donating for? Here's purposes. So like I've got 2 purposes here, general and in-kind. I can also create missions. And what you're going to do then is when you create this purpose, if you want it to impact the accounting side, then you'd check this box and say, yes, I want to track this purpose in accounting. And then you'd say this purpose is going to hit this income account, this fund, this tag, and then these tags, and that tag, and that tag, and then save. So then when I record a donation using the mission's purpose, what that's going to do is it's going to automatically impact the combination of categories that I just assigned to it here. So I will admit it's a little bit redundant of setting up a chart of accounts because you then have to come over here and create purposes, which then might even be the same exact things that you just created for, the accounts or funds or tags. But what it is, I mean, it's really beneficial once it's set up because then all you do is select the purpose. That purpose then kind of fills the need of these 5 different things that I just or 6 different things that I just selected. And then that will then automatically flow into the accounting side. So there's really no difference. It's just that on the donation side, you have to use a purpose, which will then flow into all those accounting categories. Hopefully that helps, Scotty. How would you recommend recording non-cash contributions in the system? That is easy. All you need to do is have a purpose here that is unchecked to track this purpose in accounting. If it's unchecked, it's not going to touch accounting at all. What it does is it still allows you to record a donation for in-kind or non-cash donation and click save. So you can say that Alex donated a share worth $50. That's a non-cash donation. That will then save to his name. It's going to pop up on his contribution statement. You can have it be non-tax deductible, whatever you want. It will just not flow at all into the accounting side. So that's how you would do that. See, most of my funds have expenses, but no income or equity yet. We would still like to track them as funds. Will this create problems in Aplos? No, not necessarily. But something to keep in mind is if you're tracking a fund, it's going to have a balance. And if you have a balance that's tracked using only expenses and not income or equity, anything like that, or any sort of starting balance, it's going to go negative, which can happen. You can have a negative fund balance. It's totally possible. It might not always be correct, but it's possible. So what I'd recommend is if you want it to be a fund, you can do it. It's just keep in mind that if you record expenses to something that doesn't have income or a balance, then it's just going to take it negative. You can always backfill it later on if you want to, but Something else that might help in the meantime is if it doesn't have equity, then it doesn't need a balance. You don't need a balance sheet. So if that's the case, then maybe tags would be what you want to run with in the meantime, because that would, again, get you to transaction reports. It'll show you an income statement, so you can see that there's been no income and just expenses. So there's a negative net loss there, but it's not a running balance. It's not taking a fund negative. It's not saying that, your checking account has $1,000 in it, general fund has 20 grand, and some other fund is like negative 19, whatever. That wouldn't happen. It would just basically just run an income statement showing that expenses have been accrued for this thing, but no income. So, but that's the kind of stuff with these kind of categories, there's really there's very few right answers. And a lot of it is just based on, experience and just working with it. And sometimes we create a chart of accounts that makes sense in all areas, but then once somebody starts using it, they hit some barriers and go, actually, I kind of want to create these things as funds or tags and change it around. So we're always willing to help and kind of speak into and help interpret what those needs are. So, at least if you had questions on how to kind of accomplish that or want to give it a shot, let us know, and we'd be happy to kind of provide some insight there. When I perform bank integration, the transaction description is dropping into the payee field, and I need to copy and paste it into the note memo field. Is there a mapping function that I can do to change that? Not necessarily. Now, what I would recommend there, Kevin, is to contact our support team on that and tell them that that's happening, because what might be happening is your particular bank might be unique in that. Every bank kind of does things differently. So I haven't heard of that happening to anybody else. So it's possible that whatever institution you're using just is passing through the data weird. And if that's the case, we can contact our provider and kind of work on it. But yeah, I would at least contact support about it, because that we might even know about that, and it might be a known issue, but I'm not aware of it. But they would know how to fix it. Let's see, it doesn't really fit into the topics of today, but we have two classes of donors that seem to be special cases. How do we handle anonymous donors that we must receipt but not disclose further in the system? How do we handle soft credit situations where a donor gives to Fidelity or National Christian Foundation? So this organization must be receipted, but the donor needs to be managed as well. Good question. There's really we don't really have much in the soft credit area, Ken. So I don't think we have a solution for that. Dan Kimball is a guy on staff that is our donor management guru. We hired him because he is a fantastic fundraiser and has an excellent mind for donor management systems. And he works in our support team or our success team as well. So if you want, I can kind of put you in touch with him. He might be able to recommend some other ways to track that in Aplos. I'm just not aware of one. And then the anonymous donors, same kind of thing. There's not really a good way to do it. Each donor in Aplos is identified by the name. So there's no donor number or anything kind of ambiguous that way. There's some workarounds, but I don't know that I'd recommend them. So yeah, I'd say that both of those, we probably don't have a good way to handle them at the moment. But if you want to work more, then I can put you in touch with Dan, and he can run through some possible other options with you there. Mark, are there reports that break out account activity by tag similar to that of sub-accounts? No, but it's coming. So what Mark is asking for, if I'm reading that correctly, is if I were to go to a report here, if I run an income statement, I've got, let's show zero balances. Categorically, I've got my income accounts top to bottom. With tags or with funds, those would be added as columns. But what I'm hearing is you might want to run a report that has the tags listed here vertically and then the totals. If that's the case, then that is not something we currently have, but that is something that we are, I don't want to say working on, but it's something that we are aware of and that we would love to do differently in the future. Our development team is constantly working on upgrades to the system. And that I know for a fact that is one of the ones that we have heard and digested a little bit. I just don't know if we currently have a plan on when or how to do that, but we're aware of it. I guess is the best I can give you. But and last question that I see and that we probably have time for here is, why does year-to-date information show before the current month information on the current month versus year report? Let's see, current month. Let's go back to the reports here. Current month versus year report. So year to date is first, current month is then after that. I don't have a good answer for you there, probably just because that's the way it was designed. But I mean, I can certainly file a ticket with our product manager to flip that around, or at least consider it. There might be a reason we've done it. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but it certainly makes sense that the shorter or more relevant period would be listed first, with the year to date second. But again, there might be a reason we did it that way. That always drove me nuts when I was studying for the CPA exams, which I passed, by the way. A lot of the example reports that they would show the current year on the left, and then the kind of subsequent years on the right, which for some reason just in my brain just did not compute. I wanted to look at the most recent year on the very right, and kind of from left to right have it be 16, 17, 18. Just drove me nuts. The placement just completely threw me off, and they answered a number of questions incorrectly because I looked at the wrong year. But my mistake. Anyways, all that to say, Pete, good question. I don't know, but I can certainly file a request with our product manager to see if that's something that is open-handed enough for us to change. Okay, well, it is 11:59, almost noon on my side. That has been 2 hours. Thank you all for sticking with me for 2 hours. I'm going to go not talk for the rest of the day. I've used up all of my words. Again, kind of as a recap, we've gone through a lot of content here, but in order to get the CPE requirement taken care of, you have to have answered the survey questions and been present for the majority of the time. And then there's going to be an exit survey. So when you're done, don't walk away and exit things too quickly. There's going to be an exit survey that's triggered. Answer that, and also put in your name that should appear on your certificate. And that should get you going with the CPE certification. And as always, if you have additional questions or needs, our support is free and willing. So give us a call, shoot us an email, log into the software and use the little chat bubble, whatever you want to do there, and we'd be happy to help with anything that we can help with. So thank you again all for spending your time with me here today, and we look forward to talking with you again soon. Thanks, and take care.